Okay, so today we're going to talk about the exercise prescription. So, what goes into the exercise training program that we designed for our clients? Let's take a look at what those may be. So, what is an exercise prescription? Think about that for a bit. What do we know about it? What do you think you know about it? If you have to design an exercise program for a client, maybe your roommate asks you for an exercise program, what would you put in it, right? So what would be the recipe for it? How would you go about beginning to do so? Let's think about that a little more as we go through this lecture. So here's how we want to define it. It is best designed to meet individual health and physical fitness goals, right? Principles in class here are intended to assist in the development of individually tailored exercise prescriptions. Individualized programs should be designed based on individual needs analysis. Right, so if you are going to be working with a client, you have to tailor a program for them. So sometimes wonder when I'm at the gym and I'm looking at a personal trainer. They are working with a 25-year-old female, and I see they do one program. Then I see them later, they're working with a 65-year-old man. And guess what? Same program. How does that happen? How is that an individual program, right? So the difference between personal training and group training is that in personal training, you have assessed the individual. You make some analysis of their health history, their previous exercise experience. You have conducted fitness assessments, so you have lots of data of where they are now. You understand their strength and their weaknesses. We call this, from the NSCA literature, needs analysis. You've conducted a needs analysis, and from that needs analysis, you have now written out an exercise prescription. The term prescription, think about when you go to the doctor and you get a prescription. They have conducted some analysis on you. They have done some testing on you. They maybe have diagnosed some conditions on you, and from that, they give you a prescription. Same for exercise. It comes from that place of having some data and some knowledge. So it's not a generic program that we can assign. Oh, this is a good program for losing weight. This is a good program it is individually based from the individual's needs analysis. So what may be some of the components of this exercise prescription? So what may we put into it? What may we consider depending on the individual? Will we consider maybe cardiovascular aerobic fitness, maybe muscular strength and endurance, flexibility, body composition? Those are the health components of fitness. Will we maybe add some neuromuscular fitness things such as balance and agility that come from skill components of fitness? What about bone health? Will we include some programming based on bone health? And we'll talk about how when we're working with older adults or thinking about individuals that may be more susceptible to osteoporosis, maybe we'll have to think about programming to improve bone health or bone mineral density. So what needs to be considered when you're going to determine an exercise program with all those hints I've given you so far? Individual's goals, physical ability, current physical ability. So where are they at now? This baseline. What is their starting point? What is their current health status? Right. So we have to see if there's anything that they are experiencing currently that may need delaying exercise, or they may need further medical clearance or testing. What kinds of equipment you have, right? And is there anything else? Anything else that you think might come into that picture when you're thinking about what the exercise program is going to look like? Right, so individual's goals is good. Where's right physical ability wise, which comes from your assessment, right? What else? Maybe other factors. And sometimes it's time, right? So how much time do they have? Do they have all day? Can they train with you 5 hours a day, or they really only have 30 minutes 3 times a week? Because that's going to have an impact on your programming, right? Or what other needs they may have. So a needs analysis. This is again from NSCA. I borrowed this from NSCA. Analysis of the performance, physical ability, health, and fitness needs of the individual. So this has to come from your fitness assessment, right? If you make sure you pick the right assessments for the person that you're working with. If you're working with athletes, you may consider the sport, right, that they're working for. If we're working with general population, we want to think about activities of daily living, right? We want to make sure they're capable of getting through their activities of daily living without assistance and without pain and discomfort. So conducting a needs analysis takes into account physiological and biomechanical requirements of activities that we're going to involve them in, or maybe some current injuries that they may have, any medical restrictions that they currently have. That comes from your health history form. Any individual strengths and weaknesses that we learn from the assessments. And then you got to look at your equipment and facilities and time and how much money they have to afford to pay for your training sessions. So that's another factor, and sometimes maybe even insurance reimbursement. So other individual needs that do not have to do with exercise training that we could talk about and discuss with our client, or put into our programming. How much rest and recovery may be needed, not just in between sessions, but also in between sets. If they're getting enough sleep, maybe need nutrition. Are we looking to gain or lose weight? Are they taking any supplements? Are they taking any medications? And certainly we cannot advise about telling someone to take a certain supplement, but we certainly can give them advice about what certain supplements may or may not do. Okay, and then what are the psychological aspects of exercise, or maybe or psychological needs that they may have, such as stress relief and other things like that we can talk about. So let's think about this. This is an activity I want you to do, so take some time, get a piece of paper and pencil, and you may have to stop the PowerPoint, but this is what I want to do. Write down all the physical activity and exercise that you did over the past week. So from Monday through Sunday, write down all of the physical activity that you did in the week. Stop the tape and come back. Okay, so this is what I might have done last week or sometime in the past. So let's say I did 60 minutes of yoga on Monday. I did resistance exercise on Tuesday. I did 6 exercises, 4 sets, 8 to 12 reps. Wednesday I did yoga again. Thursday I did Zumba. Friday I did resistance again. Then Saturday I did yoga. And Sunday I did resistance again. So do you think, first of all, based on what you wrote down, do you think you met the recommended levels for exercise? Okay, and then what do you think, looking up, if I were your client and I told you that I did this, is there anything that you think I'm missing, or do you think everything looks really good? Okay, so think about that, and then we're going to go looking through the guidelines. So what are those exercise recommendations for healthy adults under the age of 65? There's most of us, right? So what are the recommendations? Where do they come from? How do we know what those are, right? What should we be recommending? So think about that a little bit, okay? So here are the current exercise guidelines coming from the American College of Sports Medicine. And they do revamp them, or not revamp them, but revise them based on new research. It's all based on the research evidence. And I did give you those guidelines, so you will talk about them in a minute here. But what would they be? If you were to think about them, do you think there would be some recommendations for cardiovascular training? Do you think there would be some recommendations for resistance training? What about flexibility? Do you think there's something else that there should be some recommendations, some other type of activity that there could be some recommendations for? That could be in those guidelines. Okay. So here they are. And you do have this entire paper as one of your reading assignments, so make sure you go through it. I'm just going to give you the highlights here. So it is a program of regular exercise that includes cardiorespiratory, resistance, flexibility, and neuromotor exercise training. This one was just added with these new guidelines. This put position stand in 2011. And by the way, position stand means that the panel of experts from the American College of Sports Medicine, they didn't just get together and offer their opinion. They looked at the latest research, and based on the type of research it was, you can look at the paper. They gave it different letter classifications, A, B, C, D, and E. A being that there's lots of evidence and it's experimental, so on the top. So They rank it differently. Some maybe there's not just enough evidence yet, so it's ranked lower. Some of it D is opinion. So you can actually look at the recommendations and see what letter classification they got. Very interesting paper to read. But more importantly, they not only talk about the program should have these four components, but these should be above and beyond activities of daily living. So if you are spending your time outside of the gym in a sedentary behavior, so you spend all day sitting and all you are doing is you're exercising for an hour a day, that's not what this is about. That's not sufficient. So you need to be doing your 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 steps a day, and then on top of that you're engaging in an hour of exercise, depending on what type of exercise it is. So that would be an example. So beyond activities of daily living. This is what the paper looks like. So it's quantity and quality of exercise for developing and maintaining cardiorespiratory, musculoskeletal, and neuromotor fitness in apparently healthy adults. Is the key here. So I'm missing one line there, I'm not sure why, but apparently healthy adults. So what does that mean for us working with special populations? It means that we have to take these guidelines and determine what are the physiological and biomechanical differences in our client versus a general population, and make some adaptations of these guidelines so that exercise remains safe and effective for them. Yeah, there it is. There's my other line. So the purpose, okay, of the position stands, or this one, is to provide scientific evidence-based recommendations. So hopefully you're familiar with that term now. Again, for the development of individualized exercise prescriptions. So again, it's not like, oh, this is a good program. No. You have the prescription has to come from a place that we know the individual's needs. We've conducted that needs analysis. This one is for apparently healthy adults of all ages to improve physical fitness and overall health. And the last caveat is may also apply to persons with certain chronic diseases or disabilities, as long as we apply the appropriate modifications. So a little bit more on that as far as the guidance. This is all from your reading assignment. So most adults, it says, should engage in moderate intensity cardiorespiratory exercise training, more than 30 minutes per day, more than 5 days a week for 150 minutes or more. But it can also be met by vigorous intensity cardiorespiratory exercise less often. So the more intensely you exercise, the less often you have to do it. Certainly you're going to need more recovery. So you maybe do one HIIT workout one day, and so maybe you don't have to work out for another 2 days, right? So the intensity depending. Vigorous intensity being 60% or higher of your heart rate reserve, then you don't have to do it as often. But if you exercise at a moderate intensity, less than 60% of VO2 max, then you need to do it more often. Resistance exercise, 2 to 3 days per week. This is per body part, right? So if you're doing one exercise list. Neuromotor exercise, such as balance, agility, and coordination. This is what we call skill components, right? 2 to 3 days a week. Flexibility exercise, more than 2 days a week. Flexibility exercise works best if it's done at the end of the workout. So maybe you do, depending what type of workout you do, you always include some flexibility range of motion exercises. So a little bit more closely looking at the cardiorespiratory recommendations. So more than 150 minutes of moderate exercise through either one of these, all right? It could be a continuous session, or it could be an accumulation of multiple shorter sessions. So when we talked in the last lecture about time being an issue for many folks, it's usually the number one-sided reason for not being more physically active. If we can discuss accumulating shorter sessions, maybe one in the morning before work, one during lunch hour or during work, and maybe a little bit after work, it may be more time manageable. So something to consider. As far as the prescription for cardiorespiratory fitness is the FIT principle: frequency, intensity, and time and type. So what mode? For best adherence and least injury risk. Again, people are unable to meet these minimums, you can still benefit from some activity. So any activity is better than no activity. For resistance exercise, each major muscle group 2 to 3 days per week. So if you're doing one exercise list, that would be the same thing on Monday, same thing on Wednesday, same thing on on Friday, right? If you're using two exercise lists, then you can do like maybe upper body on Monday, lower body on Tuesday, rest Wednesday, upper body on Thursday, lower body on Friday, and so you could do more resistance training exercises as long as you're not doing any body part more than 2 to 3 days a week. Okay, as far as sets, 2 to 4 sets helps most adults, improves strength and power, but you could start with 1 set initially and then progress to more sets as you become better trained. It's okay to start with very light or light intensity for older adults or previously sedentary adults starting exercise, and adults should wait at least 48 hours between resistance training sessions, and really everyone should wait, especially if the intensity is higher. Flexibility exercise, 2 to 3 days a week to improve range of motion. Now, flexibility is not about the number of times you do it, it's about how long you keep the muscle under tension. And we're going for not pain, right? We're going for tension, so a point of tightness or slight discomfort. My favorite cue when teaching yoga or teaching or doing stretches with my participants is to say gentle tension. If they're out of breath, if they're breath holding, that is too intense. So doing stretching, they should be able to maintain their breath. Start short with 10 to 30 seconds, and then eventually accumulating those 60 seconds per stretch. The connective tissue has to mold by holding it in place for a bit, so that eventually it stays at that longer range, increases your range of motion. As we get older, the amount of muscle to connective tissue, you lose muscle, and so you have all this connective tissue that makes everything very stiff, and so folks end up with limited range of motion and overhead movements and lifting their knees up, and movement overall becomes a little bit more difficult and challenging. Always exercise with warm muscles. This is why I said earlier that it's better to do it at the end of your workout, and it starts as a nice, putting it all together, ending to a good workout to stretch at the very end. But let's suppose that there's some type of injury, you want to do some range of motion at the beginning. You can also do some passive warming ups. You can put some like a heating bag or apply some heat to the area before stretching. The one that was just added in the last guidelines is neuromotor exercise, also known in the gym world as functional fitness training, but it involves using skill components of fitness such as balance, agility, and coordination and gait. It makes you aware of where you are in space, so it engages your proprioceptives. Training is also known as that, but a lot of the research that was included in the ACSM had to do with Tai Chi and yoga, and that's where the benefits associated with those formats, and that can be done in about 20 to 30 minutes a day. Okay, so let's look at this. So how did I do? If you were to say, did I meet all of the requirements based on last week's workout for based on the ACSM guidelines for exercise, their position stand? What do you think? Let's see. Did I meet my cardiorespiratory? Do you see any cardiorespiratory exercise at all that week, except for the 60 minutes of Zumba? That's all I got. So didn't quite meet it. What about resistance 2 to 3 days a week? Yep, I did. Tuesday, Friday, and Saturday. What about neuromotor? Well, yoga is considered neuromotor, so I got a lot of that. And yoga does include, that's part of what yoga is, flexibility. So that's all I did here. I missed the cardiorespiratory part on this week. How did you do? How did you do? Maybe you can think about next week how to revise or plan for next week so that you are including a little bit different types of workouts.